Welcome back to our video podcast series where we want to inspire youth to take action by highlighting personal stories of activists and social entrepreneurs. My name is Ella and I am a project coordinator here at Nordic Pioneers. And today we are here with one of our dear jury members, Ronja Salmi.
Hi.
Would you like to introduce yourself, where you're from, and what age you are?
Lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And I'm Ronja Salmi. I'm 30 years old and I come from Helsinki, Finland. I'm a journalist and an author, among many other things.
Super. So let's just dig into it. What kind of activist messages are important for you?
As a journalist, I would say that I don't really have an activist message in that sense, because being an activist and being a journalist, they are very different roles. But obviously, I do have values, and those values do show through my work. And in my work, I've focused on mental health quite a lot, sexuality, gender, a lot of episodes about different kinds of drugs, these kind of taboo subjects. So I guess I tend to do episodes and tell stories about people who are less privileged than many of us. So human rights are probably the thing that I always go back to in any of my reporting. So I would say human rights are the basis for my values, and in that sense, maybe somebody can see them as activism as well, but I don't view that as activism.
Okay, I see. So these are sort of the social problems that you have identified in Finland and the Nordics, and try to work through your journalism. I see. Super interesting. Is it a hard work, like a hard job to do?
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes. I've recently...
Because there are quite difficult topics, I guess.
But I also think that the culture and the way we discuss about things in Finland has changed for the better also in recent years. Not everything is better, but I think we are better when it comes to talking about mental health, for example, sexuality, gender. People are more open about discussing these things. Obviously, there's always, when someone is brave enough to talk about taboo subjects, there will be a backlash of some sort. But is it a difficult job? I've recently thought quite a lot about that. Maybe it's actually more difficult to do reporting on ordinary things that are less shocking or revealing. And most of us live quite a common and steady life that don't really include anything that shocking, and many things that happen to us are quite slow in their pace. And this media field that we all live in is quite fast paced, and all the algorithms, they support these kind of shocking news, breaking news kind of stuff. So I've been trying to think, how can I tell stories that develop really slowly in an interesting way? Is there something lingering in the air that we should grab and report on that, instead of going for the places where there's a fire or an accident, something sudden happening? Maybe sometimes we underestimate the things that happen very slowly, how big they can become in time.
For sure. So during your journey, have you ever met resistance or opposition because of your age? And
yes, definitely. In my career, unfortunately, there have been many incidents where my age and gender have been in the headline of things. I was working as the head of program for Helsinki Book Fair. It's the biggest literature event in the Nordics. And when I started in the job, I was 24 years old. I did it for 4 years, but I was very young when I started. Even I considered myself young for the job, and that raised quite a lot of questions in the media, in social media, but also just among like the people that I work with. There were people who felt that I was not suitable for the job because of my age, and I also think because of my gender. And it didn't feel obviously nice. Definitely didn't feel nice when I haven't even started in the job. I think like giving criticism to someone before they have actually done anything is not really fair. I luckily proved them wrong. And then there are other incidents as well. There was one time I was asking for a pay raise because I was aware that an older male colleague was getting double what I was getting for the same job. And the response was that you're so young that you should see this job as an opportunity and not focus on the money. And I obviously said that that's bullshit, and I got the pay raise in the end. But these kind of things do happen, and it's sad because people think that we are past these kind of things, but no, we are not, unfortunately.
So what would you say, like, how do you tackle those, that sort of opposition within yourself as well?
Quite often it just helps to reverse the roles and ask yourself, maybe another person as well, would you say this to an older male? Would you act this way if I wasn't a woman? So just changing the roles sometimes makes people see a bit clearer what's going on. Just recently, but now when we are recording this, just a couple of days ago, we all witnessed Rihanna playing at the Super Bowl, and there was some criticism against her after the show because people thought that the way she performed was kind of like lazy or boring or something because she was dancing all the time, and she was kind of like nonchalant in her performance. And it's probably noticeable to say that she's also pregnant while she was doing the show, and that does influence the way you can perform. But I was just saying online that would we ask the same question of like if this performance was done by a male performer? I'm not seeing many male rappers, for example, shaking their asses while they are rapping at the same time. But somehow, when there's a woman performing, we demand her to change outfits and dance and sing perfectly at the same time. But if there's a male performance going on, maybe a rock band, it's completely fine that they have a t-shirt and jeans and they just rock on, and that's a great performance. So we have these like double standards.
Different standards
Just
depending
like
on
in
gender.
ordinary life. And they come up in pop culture, they come up in work culture and in society as well.
So I want to ask you a little bit more about your specific projects. But before doing so, I would just like to ask what the most rewarding part of your work generally is.
Well, there are multiple moments in my work where I feel extremely happy and privileged and lucky. Just when I'm writing, I'm an author, and I also write columns and scripts and all sorts of things. And it's a lonely job, but the most rewarding thing is when you know you've hit it. Like you get somehow even surprised by your own words. It sounds a bit dumb, but it's the moment when you have written something and then you go back to that text for a while, after a while, to edit it, and then you go like, that's pretty well said. Like, good on me. That's a rewarding moment, and that's what you live for as a writer, that you can be satisfied and happy with your own work. And also, of course, when that work goes out and people respond to it, I use a lot of Instagram. I have connection with my audience through Instagram, and when people share their intimate stories, feelings, their memories, conversations that they had with their partners because of my writing or my reporting, it does affect me, and it makes me believe that there's someone out there reading and watching what I'm doing. And then maybe a third moment when I feel really lucky and happy about my work is when I do my journalistic work and I go to someone's house, for example, or some intimate place that they have, and they just open their heart to me. And every time, that feels just like, I just when the moment is over and I'm just like standing like in a parking lot somewhere like middle of Finland, some unknown city or village that I've never been to, and I just stand there and think like, I just met a stranger and they told me like the most interesting, intimate thing that has ever happened to them, and I get to like hear it and I get to share it. And in those moments, I'm just really happy about people, like how nice people can be, that they open their homes and they open their minds and hearts. So that's really rewarding, to get that kind of trust.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine. So you are an expert in storytelling, especially over social media, where you made this groundbreaking moves in Finland as the CEO of, I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Reverie? Okay. Super. So how do you use social media to get your points across?
Well, I use social media in multiple ways. It's a way of getting feedback, obviously. You don't have to ask for it, it just comes. Good and bad.
Good and bad.
Mostly good, I have to say. I'm using Instagram because it is currently in Finland quite a safe space for a young woman to be. You cannot say that of Twitter, for example. That's a very hostile place to be as a young woman, unfortunately. But I use Instagram and I get like nice feedback, even though it's not always praising me. The tone is very often very like conversational. That if someone has something that they want to criticize, they often present it in a nice way that we can actually have a conversation about it. And many times they're also right. So like giving me feedback on things that I should have done better is obviously very helpful.
Okay.
But then I use social media as a platform to just get my message out. If I have something that I want to say, comment on, and then I kind of feel that it's also a place to present your work. Like you can right from the beginning when you're starting to plan something, it's a possibility that its home platform is a social media platform, because that's where people already are. So it has multiple ways of being present in my life and in my work life. And with my audience, I also test ideas quite quite often. That if I'm thinking about maybe I should do a series or an episode about a certain subject, I might just put it on Instagram and see how they react.
Yeah, it's a really game changer compared to in the previous
Yes,
decades to be able to ask that and get new knowledge in that way.
People react very fast, which is really nice.
Exactly. So I would like you to describe a bit about your TV show, this What's Up, Ronja Salmi. So what kind of topics does it cover, and why did you choose these
I
themes?
did for the national broadcasting company YLE. I did my own show for 3 seasons, and it covered multiple taboo subjects like mental health, drugs, sexuality, gender, and we had a secret manifest behind the series. So the idea was that every episode, every subject that we cover must somehow make people feel less lonely. And that was the secret manifest. That every time we pick a subject, it should make people feel like, oh God, I'm not alone. Like there's others like me. And if the subject somehow fit to that criteria, we would do it. And it was nice. Yeah.
So where did it? Oh, sorry. Continue. No, I wanted to ask where you got this idea
I actually got the idea of Secret Manifest from a Norwegian TV series called Scum. Because I read about the writing process of Scum, and I heard that they have this kind of secret manifest, and I really liked the idea. Secret in a way that you don't have to tell the audience right from the start that this is a series that is supposed to make you feel less lonely. You don't have to say it out loud, but it can be like this guiding idea that you have behind your work, and if you succeed, then people will say it back to you when you have finished the job. And we were able to do that. So when the show aired, many people sent me messages saying that I feel less lonely now. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for covering this subject. I didn't know that it was so widespread, or I didn't know that other people are feeling the same way. It really made me feel seen. So then you know that your secret manifest has worked.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's kind of like this idea that has to be between the lines, not on the lines. And I'm currently working on another series, and it's called, I would translate it maybe Confidential Ronja Salmi, or With Trust Ronja Salmi. And the theme there is this idea that in society we are constantly bombarded with this idea that if you give something your all, like everything, 100%, success and greatness and happiness will follow. And in the series, I want to find out, does it actually work that way? And I'm following 6 young persons, and they are all in their own field giving their all. And I'm following them for half of a year to see that do they get what they want, and if they do, does it fulfill them? Is it worth it in the end? And if they don't get what they want, how does that make them feel? So
that sounds super interesting. We have to follow up on this.
And I wanted to do a series where I'm trying to figure out something that is in the air, like this kind of thought or a myth, a story that we are all kind of somehow we're all kind of believing, but nobody has really like paused and thought that does it actually work this way, or are we just like somehow schemed to believe that it works this way? So that's a new project.
And you have I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. You've also launched the world's first Instagram stories drama series, this Karma, and then Finland's first chat fiction series, Girl Squad. But I'm not so familiar with these plots of these shows, so maybe you could tell me a bit what the message they try to
Yeah,
convey is.
my company produced this series a couple of years ago. They are fictional, so a bit different from my, for example, journalistic work or the documentary work that I'm doing currently. Those series were meant to entertain, but they are obviously like the values are always behind everything. I always say to people that like feminism it itself, I don't think is a good subject for any show, because everything that we do should be feminist in some way. It's not a subject. It's a
Yeah.
way of looking the world. It's a point of view, and it should go through your work, not to be the subject of your work. And in those series, the values are present, and I think it shows mostly who are the actors, like what kind of backgrounds they have. So it's not an all white cast. And in chat fiction, there were no actors, just scripted text, basically what it is from its core. But we made sure that the characters had like different backgrounds, and also sexual minorities are present in the plots, and there's like other things that relate to representation. And I think representation in fictional work is also quite important, because the world is not simple.
Yeah, for sure. It's because that sort of leads me on to the next question about how you believe this actually adds value to the lives of young people. And you
Yeah,
sort of
I think
mentioned a bit now.
representation, seeing yourself in the world, is super important. I think everyone has the right to see someone like them in the media, in social media, in fiction, all sorts of fields in life. I often think that first you kind of have to see yourself in the world. Like when we are developing as human beings, when we're young, a part of our growth is a part when we feel that we are the only ones. I think everyone has gone through this idea when we are teenagers, that I am the only one in the world who's feeling this way, and there's nobody like me, and I will never find anyone who's even close to me or feels the same way. And it's super important to like find your people, and you can find your people hopefully in your school, in your hobbies, in your family, but then you also have to find your people in the world, like in pop culture, in literature, in films. And if you are not able to find yourself, like nobody looks like you, nobody talks like you, has anything to do with you, then you might think that you don't really matter, or you don't have a voice, or your story is less important than someone else's, and that can be very damaging. So first you have to find yourself in the world, and then after you found yourself, then I think it's possible to get interested about others as well. So I don't think, for example, art has to be just a mirror of our world. It also has to be a window. Like I think the first stage somehow is finding a mirror, finding yourself, and then after it
Yeah.
becomes a window and you can get interested about other people as well. And it's hard to be interested about other people if you haven't really found yourself before. So that's why I think representation matters.
I really like what you said about the
Yeah.
mirror and the window. That was beautifully said. So you mentioned before that you are the head of this Helsinki Book Fair program. So how can writing and literature be used for the greater good, according to you?
Yeah, I used to do that job. I did it for 4 years, and now I have passed the power on. And
Yeah.
I think it's also important to let go of power at some point, not get used to it, and realize that you're always borrowing power. It's never yours. You're just holding it for a moment, and then you'll have to give it to someone else. But how can literature and writing change the world for the better? Well, writing is a very powerful tool in itself. It's a weapon, and it can be used for good and bad, and it has been used for good and bad um, for thousands of years. And then there's another question of, should art be like political in a sense, or should art try to actively change the world? And I think it's a debate that's going to go on forever in art. And some people are always going to say that art has to be political, or it always is political, even when you try to be non-political. That's already political. So it's this ongoing discussion, and nobody's going to be right about it at any point. It's just a thing that we're always going to discuss. And I think it's up for the writer to decide and for the author to decide what they actually want to achieve with this book. And it can be a feeling, it can be an idea, it can be information, and it's the freedom of expression and the freedom of being a writer that you get to decide what you want to achieve with your writing. And then
For sure.
I also think it's important to write really horrible stuff, like ugly things, horrible things, because that's also part of the world. And it would be very boring if all like fictional characters, for example, would be heroes, because the world doesn't work that way. So being able to write about uncomfortable things as well is important. And it can be a way of changing the world, because it doesn't work that way that when you write an immoral character and I read about it, then I become like bad with my moral. It doesn't work that way. It may work the opposite. And
yeah,
and in
and
the
we
end,
learn.
I guess yes, the writer has power to influence other people's minds. It's a very powerful tool to get people to follow your train of thought. I guess writing in the end is the only way to penetrate someone's brain in that level, that you make them follow your ideas and your words and sentences. But then there's always the responsibility of the reader, how you receive it, what do you do with it, how do you act after it.
For sure.
So it's this power balance between the writer and the reader.
So one of our former Nordic Pioneer Prize award winners, a Norwegian young man, he fights for representation of young people through these publishing columns by young people. And I would like to ask you what you think, or what you would say is the importance of representation of young people in this type of media.
Yeah, I was really inspired by his work. I thought it was super cool and unique, and nothing like this at that scale is happening in Finland, and I think this is one of the best things about the Nordic Pioneer Prize, that we get to learn, us Nordic people get to learn from each other, and youth should be represented in the media as well, because they are part of the world even before they are 18. And I feel that after, like, the internet has changed the hierarchy of knowledge, because we used to have this hierarchy that some people would have knowledge and then they would kind of give it to other people somehow below them. And now when everyone has access to internet, and it's not like the knowledge is not coming from up to down, it's more a network, it's a net of information, and everyone has access to it. I think some people are still trying to understand that, yeah, in this modern age, it can be possible that younger people have more knowledge about certain things than older people. That this hierarchy of knowledge actually doesn't have much to do with age. Certainly, age can matter in some cases, but not in all. And that's why I think it's important that we have these platforms where young voices can be heard, because I genuinely think that there are many subjects that we should listen to the wiser ones that happen to be younger than the ones who are sitting in the Parliament House. And like the biggest issues that we have at the moment globally, for example, climate crisis, is something that, well, the young, they have a lot of it coming for them. So it's super important that they fight for their future, basically, and make their voices heard.
So what advice would you give to a young person who wants to change but are intimidated by, for instance, the lack of representation, if it's their age or race or sexuality or gender, etc.?
If you have anything you want to change in the world, I think finding your unique point of view to that subject is always very important, and that this applies to writing as well. There are many important subjects in the world, but with a subject you don't actually do much. You should have a point of view, a way of what approaching the subject. And when you find that unique way of approaching, then you're onto something. Then you have something to say. Because just stating that racism is bad doesn't really get you further than that. It kind of ends with that sentence. But if you have a point of view to that issue, if you have maybe even something personal, how you wanna approach it, then you're on the right track. And if you feel that you're struggling, it's difficult, you probably feel quite alone, then I would say that find a friend, find someone. You don't have to be able to do everything on your own. You don't have to know how to do everything on your own. Seek for help, like seek for someone else, someone who thinks the same way and shares the values that you have and is excited about your point of view. And this is also a way of finding those persons. Like when you have a unique point of view, it's easier for other people to grab to it. Like, yeah, this is cool. Like, this is interesting. Okay, we can work with this. So find your point of view, find other people, and then remember that every single journey is taken one step at a time. It's very annoying and it can be very frustrating because you have a goal and you would love to go there fast, but you just have to take one step at a time. And unfortunately, that doesn't change with your age. It's always one step at a time. So try to be patient and try to have fun on the way as well, because even in the hardest parts and even in the hardest jobs that people are doing, having fun, enjoying yourself, kind of, it keeps you grounded, and it reminds you why are you on that path in the first place. I
think that's some amazing
and I
advice.
remember talking to a person who was working for the Red Cross and working on war zones, so the worst possible places you can imagine. So they would have to pause their work because of bombs, because they had to seek shelter, and because it's an active war zone. And this person would tell me that, and then when the bombing stops, we come out of the shelter and we would have the best barbecue parties, like the most fun, dancing and good food and friends and enjoying. And it might sound absurd that somebody is having a barbecue party in the middle of a war zone, but it keeps you grounded and it makes you remember why are you there in the first place. What are you fighting for? Like, this is the thing that you're fighting for: humanity, peace, your friends, your loved ones. So there's no point of doing activist work if you're just struggling and being too hard on yourself. So try to have fun on the way, even in the hardest times.
That brings me into one of the last questions, because I read this article from Helsingin Sanomat where you said that the self-made entrepreneur is a myth, and that you built a lot for yourself, but you never did it alone. And it brings me back to what you said about like having people around you that supports you. Is that sort of the message from this philosophy, or could you explain a bit more?
I think there are 2 points. I absolutely think that self-made is never true, because nobody lives here alone. We are always a combination of ourselves and our abilities, but also the people around us and the society around us. No one lives in a vacuum and would be able to do everything on their own. You always need other people. So saying that you're self-made, I think it's stupid. I'm not self-made. I don't know anyone who's self-made. And then there's another point of I've been able to do great stuff on in my work life, in my career, and starting from a very young age. I started working in the media business when I was 17, and I'm now 30 and still going and thriving. And yes, my own abilities and my own hard work has a big role in it, but also my background. And the generations before me have played a huge part, and they play a huge role. And I think this is something that when we are talking about the equal opportunities that the society gives to people, well, it doesn't give equal opportunities to everyone. Not everyone is born to a family that would, for example, appreciate culture and reading like my family did. I'm not coming from a wealthy family, but I'm coming from a family with a rich cultural background. So I have an advantage in that sense when it comes to the field that I'm working in, media and culture. So it would be very foolish of me saying that it's all because of me. No. It's all partly because of my mother and her mother and her mother and all the fathers in between. And I'm a feminist in 4th generation. So my mother and my grandmother and my grandmother's mother was already a feminist, which means
Wow.
that I've been brought up in this
Yeah.
environment where it's been perfectly clear that I can do anything, and my gender is not an issue, and there's no one way of being a woman, and that has influenced me in such a deep level, because I've never had to question my worth as a human. I never have to question, is it worthy that I do something in the world? Does my voice matter? Do I even have something to say? Like, these questions did not, they were not there in my childhood, in my youth. So I'm very privileged in that sense, that I've been raised in such a positive way, that I have been able to believe in myself from a very young age. And I think this is what feminism can do for everyone, not just young girls, but also young boys and non-binary people,
Yeah.
um, that you are worthy. I think that's one of the most important messages.
I think that's a perfect concluding note on that, because that was all of my
Wonderful.
questions for today. Do you want to add anything, or anything you want to
I
ask
think we're
me?
good. I'm just
Perfect.
really happy about the Pioneer Prize kind of family that is building now, even like this network of people, because I think there's quite a lot of things that we can learn from each other. It's somehow,
For sure.
it's very strange how often we look for the United States or some very far away country
Mm,
for examples of how things should be done, when we should look at our neighbors. Like, we
mm,
have similar societies, and we have similar nature in many places. Like, we share kind of the same
mm.
feeling of living. So we should also learn from each other, and not just be
Exactly.
jealous to all the Swedes, for example. The Finnish people are always jealous, and we kind of look up for the Swedish people. And every time we somehow win them in ice hockey or something, we're celebrating like, "Yay, finally we did it!" It's like a big sister or a big brother for us. So maybe this um, envy that we have should be more of friendship and curiosity than just battling
For sure.
on ice hockey
And
field.
across, yeah, across the borders, across ages. Um, it's a
Yes.
really good initiative, I would say. But thank you so much for participating. We're
Thank you.
super happy for this. And I also want to remind everyone that our
Yes.
nominations are now open
Nominate.
for this year's prize. All right. So I will just stop the recording.